the question, I don't think, to Rachel's point that kicked off the evening, which I think frames all of this, Stephanie, because you've mentioned this a few times, is not, is she going to get more delegates than him? That's just not really in the cards. It's what is she doing, and is she? No, I mean that respectfully. I mean, and she has been raising a lot of money. So what tends to happen is campaigns collapse when they can't raise money, and they tend to stop being able to raise money when it becomes clear they can't win. That's usually just the sort of cascade effect. Because of everything Rachel said at the top of the show, she's in something of a different category, which there are people with cash to give who are willing to give money to that candidate to continue a campaign to be precisely that kind of understudy.
Rachel nailed it. She's running to be understudy, right? And the people who are donating to her right now, many of them, especially in places like New York, like Palm Beach, Florida, like L.A., are running under this hope that we will just be done with Donald Trump and they can get their fantasy to get that George Bush Republican back. Again, a ridiculous long shot, but they're happy to keep writing checks to her because she's only going to stop when she runs out of money.
Correct.
And the checks ain't stopping.
So let me just follow up that. What's the ... there in the donor class theory of this? The people that are writing her checks, and she's also raising small dollar donors, right? Because there's a lot of people who don't like Donald Trump and want Nikki Haley to stay in the race, right? He is a polarizing figure, obviously. What is the ... like he gets convicted and collapse? Like,
okay, here's the funny thing. The kind of people who are writing her big checks here in New York are the same people who write big checks to no labels. So in theory, they're like, yeah, like, we don't like this two-party system. We don't think these two guys are the right guys. We need something else. And none of those people who write the checks understand how the electoral process works. That's the issue. And so they don't actually have anything at the end of this ... but they're happy to write the check as a flyer.
Rachel.
Steph, can I just ask you, why didn't it work when the Trump campaign made that threat a few weeks ago that anybody who kept donating to Nikki Haley would be cut off and dead to me, and they'd be put on an island and set on fire, and MAGA would never speak to them again? They made this total end of the world threat to the donors. Why didn't it work?
Because they're not afraid of him. Because truly rich people know that Donald Trump is going to kiss right up to them when they make friends again.
Correct.
Right? Think back to when Donald Trump was president. All of those business leaders, that whole Palm Beach set that made fun of him for decades, he loved when they were hanging out with him again. So yes, for the time being, he's threatening them. But I assure you, when a super mega rich person who owns a sports team wants to befriend him again, he's going to get right back in.
It's a very crazy dynamic, though, because if Haley, as you guys are saying, and I think this is totally right, if Haley stays in as long as she has money, and if her money flow continues to be totally independent of her prospects of winning, that is a recipe for her staying in and her being a sort of irritant to Trump, him being unable to say that he's got it sewn up, him being unable to ignore her. That's a recipe for this continuing indefinitely, which is absolutely the understudy role. And it is 100% unprecedented. I mean, it makes it almost more of a Ross Perot kind of candidacy than it is a Pat Buchanan type candidacy or something else, or a Pat Robertson candidacy, something else that's happening within the party.
The only thing I would caution, I mean, I am sure that there are people with deep pockets that want her to stay in forever, but you can be an understudy presuming the audience doesn't boo you when you get on stage. And I think the longer she is in this race, the more she turns off the actual Republican base that would need to come and vote for her in a general election. Or she can pair off these moderates and independents maybe in a general, but the party itself has to vote for this person if indeed the understudy ascends to the leading role, right? And I don't want to lose sight of this because we kind of glossed over it. Donald Trump has poisoned a vast wing of the Republican Party to the degree that they will never vote for Nikki Haley. He began spewing lies and bigotry directed at migrants coming into this country, saying they were coming from insane asylums. It sounds awful and comic and everything else, reprehensible, of a variety of things to us. But the reality is, you look at the exit polling in South Carolina, 2016, should most illegal immigrants working in the U.S. be offered a chance to apply for legal status or deported? 53% of them said they should be offered to apply for legal status. 44% said they should be deported. This year, 27% of them think they should be allowed to apply for legal status. 70% think they should be deported.
But Alex, it's about who is booing her, right? I think it was Joy who said at the beginning of the show, her corporate aspirations. She lives on Kiowa Island.
Yeah.
She might lose big in South Carolina. She ain't losing by her neighbors in Kiowa. They're rich New Yorkers.
I think the LinkedIn is probably pretty up to date for Nikki Haley.